Because I was gonna get a veggie tray, and I was like, nope, not today. So for me, it's like, I just outside of your background. I don't know. Well, and then what they're really looking for is I'm like, okay, like one basketball. Yeah, no, Sam. I got that side question, and I was like, well, one basketball fits in the toilet. So I was like, if you fit so many toilets in the Yeah, I don't know.
hope this is. My understanding is she went on travel all the time. You know, I think I was getting that one. Was it that one was, that one was, I don't this is oh, no, yeah. Just a little bit. I mean, my 9 to 5. Oh, yeah, what is that? I'm forgetting. I'm sales operations for oh, really? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're doing a where's Phil? Oh. I'm not in talks. Yeah, it's pretty.
group today, so we want to keep this as interactive as possible. For those that don't know, I'm Sam Nita. I'm heading up the Lesbians Tech Austin chapter, and who's the first time? Yes. Awesome. So we've been around for about a year and a half here in Austin, but we're in 38 cities around the U.S. and there's over 30,000 members. And we've got about 300 here in Austin. And we run mostly events. Sometimes they're social based, sometimes they're educational based. And today we're really fortunate to have Chip Rosenthal here to talk to us about best APIs. So I just want to kind of get this going. So go ahead. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Right, yeah, so,
Check. That seems to be working. Hi, everybody. I'm Chip. Thank you so much for inviting me. Are we good? Yes. We did an AV check before, but obviously neglected the sound check in the AV check. Again, thanks for inviting me. My name is Chip. During the day, I am a software developer. I'm what you would probably call a back-end developer. So one of the things I do in my job is I design APIs for our products. By the way, I would like to mention, if you are looking for work and interested in any of this stuff, the company I work for is called Eris. We make broadband equipment, but the group I'm in makes the software that manages these millions of broadband devices and residential networks. We're primarily looking for senior developers and architects, back-end Java and front-end developers. So if you're interested, please speak to me, because we'd love to talk to you. So I would like to start out with a problem issue. And what this problem is that I would like a program that would help me know when I'm going to go outside. Do I need to wear a coat? What's the weather like? Is it going to be cool enough that I want an outer layer? And because I am a developer, I wrote that program. And it's called CodeCheck. I've got it on my laptop right here. And I'm now going to run the CodeCheck program. It's just a small little command line application. And it is running here. And so CodeCheck ran. It determined it is currently 76 degrees in Austin and decided that's warm enough that I don't need to wear a jacket. But here's the thing. By what magic does my laptop sitting there know it's 76 degrees in Austin? I don't have a weather station attached. I've just got power and video cable, no magical devices. Yet somehow my laptop was able to determine it's 76 degrees outside, and my CodeCheck application could decide that it's too warm to wear a coat. And the answer is yes, it is magic. It's the magic of web services. And let's take a look at that. What I'd like to do is my wall of text slide, because there has to be one. By the way, a lot of what's in these slides is stuff that I want to demonstrate to you. I've just put it in slides as backup in case the demos don't work, so we'll be doing a bunch of skipping. I do have a link to the slides that I can share with you, and so if you want to get back to any of the resources we mentioned there, they are in the slides, but as we go through this, we'll jump back and forth. So, definitions. All right, so let's say we've got two software components, and I'm using component in the most general notion. Could be two separate programs, could be two modules in the same program, could be programs on two different machines. We're going to call them components. And one of these components offers some kind of service, and the other software component wants to access the service. So there's going to be a formal defined interface to get to that service. And that's what we call an API, an application programming interface. Those are just the rules by which two software components can interact. Now, when those components are communicating across the web using HTTP, the protocol of the web, we would call that a web API or a web service. That's simply two components interacting using HTTP as a transport. Now, there are several kinds of web services that you may have heard of. And I don't want to go into these too deeply because I'm not sure the formal definitions do us a lot of good. We'll just take a look at a bunch of them. But just so you're aware of some of these terms, one that's really popular is a REST type API. And one of the features of REST is that it sits very closely right on top of this web HTTP protocol. And in fact, when REST was developed, it was developed in parallel with the HTTP 1.1 protocol. So they have a lot in common. There's another type of web API I'm going to call an RPC API. And I don't want to beat this one over the head too much. But the difference between a REST API and an RPC API is kind of the design and architecture of them. And in fact, a lot of what people call a REST API is actually an RPC API. REST really implies a certain kind of architecture. Again, the details aren't necessarily important to us. You know, we'll look at them, we'll see how they operate, and it doesn't matter what, whether you call that REST or RPC, we'll see how they work. And one other kind of API I'd like to mention just briefly is called SOAP. SOAP is another popular form of API, and we aren't going to touch this even with 10-foot poles. SOAP is used quite a bit, particularly in larger enterprise-type environments. The difficulty with SOAP, and the reason why it's starting to fall into disfavor, is as opposed to REST, which is very thin and resides right on top of HTTP, SOAP is a very complex protocol, and it involves a lot of overhead. And so a lot of what may have originally been done in SOAP is now migrating towards REST, and you're seeing a lot of new services tend to be developed using REST. Okay, so now that we're done with that, let's go back to my code check application. And so the magic of code check is it uses a web service. It uses one of these APIs. It uses the API offered by Weather Underground. You may be familiar with it. Weather Underground is a pretty popular website with weather information. They also develop mobile apps. Even if you're not directly using a Weather Underground product, chances are fairly high you may be using their service because a lot of applications and products are written on top of their API. And that's what CodeCheck uses. Whenever you're going to be using a new API, the first thing you're going to want to look for are the API docs. And sure enough, Weather Underground does have an API doc. It's linked there. That will tell you how to access the API and how to use it. So that's a very important resource. So what I'd like to do is walk you step by step through how the Weather Underground Current Conditions API works. To To use this API, we're going to need two pieces of information. The first thing we need is an API key. A lot of these services require an authorization key. That's because they sit on the public internet. They need to know that the people who are accessing the service are authorized to use the service. They may also do some resource management, and that with your API key, you only get a certain number of queries. So in a lot of cases, you will need to register to get this token, this API key. Some services will give you an API key for free. Some will charge you. It tends to be for so many thousand queries. Some work on a freemium type plan, where you will get a certain tier of free usage, and if you go beyond that usage, or if you want to incorporate their API into a commercial application, you will have to pay for it. Weather Underground is that freemium type of service. So you can register, get a free account, get your API token, and that will give you a limited but generally sufficient number of queries. The other thing you're going to need is the location where you want to get your weather conditions. And I knew by looking at the API docs that Weather Underground wants me to specify that in a state/city format, as in TX/Austin. So those are the two pieces of information I need to do my query. The next thing I need to do is to figure out where to go to make my query. Every resource on the web has an URL. An URL is an identifier for that resource. Whether it's a web page, whether it's an API endpoint, it has an URL. When we're talking about an API, we call it an endpoint URL. That's the place you're going to query to use the API. Now, the pointer work, yes. So the most basic form of the simplest URL is there's a scheme part, in this case HTTP, followed by a host, API weatherunderground.com, followed by a path. And so there's this longish path here, and you'll notice there are a couple of placeholder tokens in that path. What I'm going to need to do is substitute in those two pieces of information there. Those are called path parameters, where I make these substitutions into the path. So once I stick the API authorization key and my location for the query into that path, I get the full endpoint. And so that is the full endpoint URL for me to make a query for the conditions in Austin, Texas. When I do that, just like with a web browser, you make a query, you get back some sort of document. You're used to seeing HTML documents. In this case, I'm going to get not an HTML document, but something called JSON. So that is a data format, and that encodes the current conditions object into a JSON format. So I actually can take my web browser, and I'm going to click on the link to do an HTTP GET, and that is what comes back. And that is what a JSON document looks like. JSON is a fairly simple format. It's name value. So for instance, I can see it's currently 76.8 degrees Fahrenheit in Austin. If you remember when my CoCheck app ran a moment ago, that's what it saw. And there's a whole bunch of information here about current conditions. The values in these JSON objects, they can be numbers, like the temperature. They can be text strings enclosed in quotes, and they also can be objects. So for instance, the display location is the location I asked for, Austin. So this display location object, this whole thing, has a bunch of parameters. For instance, the full name of the city. And objects can be within objects, so my top level object here, this whole big thing is current observation. Does that make sense? I would like to suggest, if you're going to be using your browser to look at these JSON documents, your browser probably has some sort of extension you can add to format it nicely. I don't know if you noticed, but when I was hovering over that JSON document, it would highlight pieces, and they were nicely colored and nicely formatted. That's because in my Google Chrome browser, I've added a JSON view extension. Regardless of which browser you're using, it probably has some sort of extension you can use for this. So highly recommend it. Buckle in, I've got some code here. And so this is the CodeCheck application. It is a Ruby application. And my reason for bringing this up is to show you how easy it is to interact with a REST API. If you're not a coder, follow along. I think it'll make sense. If you're not a Ruby coder, don't panic, because the basic concepts are going to apply whether you're doing Ruby, Python, JavaScript, whatever. It's going to be fairly similar. So in this application, I'm using two library modules, one to help me make REST queries, another one to parse those JSON documents. As we saw earlier, there are two pieces of information I need to define. Two pieces of information I need to define to access the API. I'll need to substitute those into the URL to get the full endpoint. In Ruby, this # curly brace is the expression for substituting a value in. That gives me the full URL of the endpoint. Then I call the REST client library, the get method, on that URL, and that is actually going to execute the HTTP GET, come back with an HTTP response. So within that response, I've got the JSON object, the JSON JSON document, excuse me. I want to parse that into an easy-to-use data object. And then through the magic of Ruby hashes, I pick apart pieces of that data object to get to the display location full to get the name of where we're observing. And then within current observation, I get the tempf property to get the current temperature. And then I just simply print out my message that it's temperature in location right now. If it's hotter than 70 degrees, I don't need a code. If it's between 60 and 70, I suggest a sweater, and below 60, I say wear a coat. But all the really hard work is done in these two steps. One step to execute an HTTP GET on that URL, and another on the JSON parse to unlock the data. So let's look at another API. I have the wall of text slide, so this is the cat picture slide, very important. This is a really super simple API. And so when we do these HTTP operations, they always come back with a status code. For instance, you may have browsed web pages and hit a 404. That 404 is meaningful to HTTP. That means whatever you're looking for is not found. You ask for a web page that doesn't exist. These status codes are part of the HTTP protocol. This HTTP cat web service returns not JSON documents, but JPEG photos. So it's very simple. Again, a scheme, this time HTTPS for a secure connection. The host name is HTTP cat, and the path is just a single path parameter. It's the code you want. And so here's the endpoint to look up a 200 code. And 200 is the status you get when your request is successful, 200 OK. And so the API gives me copacetic path. As I said, 404 is the status for not found. So if I do a query on the 404 endpoint, it gives me a JPEG result of not found cat. And the other one I'm showing here is a 500 status, and that's the status you get when there's an error in the server, like maybe the database is offline or something. And so if we execute a query on that, we get server error count. So this is a really simple API, but interestingly, it doesn't return JSON, it returns JPEGs. This stuff about the HTTP statuses is marginally important in these simple queries we're doing, like that library that I used in Ruby to do the get. If there was some sort of error code, it would have thrown an exception to let me know. The status codes become a lot more important as we start doing more complex queries, creating data, deleting data, things like that. All right, another API. So this is an API for time zone DB, and what this web service does, it allows me to get information on a time zone. What I can do is I can query with a map location, and it returns to tell me what the time zone is at that location. And so, once again, here's our URL template. There's a scheme, HTTP, the host, API timezonedb.com, and the path. But notice this time the path is fixed. The v2 get time zone. There are no path parameters in there. What we've got this time is after that fixed path, there's a question mark and then a query string. And so the query string is additional information added onto the end of the URL, and we're going to have to substitute some parameters in there. The query parameters we're going to use in this case, we want to tell it to do the search by position. We're going to give it the map location, latitude and longitude. Those are the coordinates for Austin. We want to tell it to return a JSON format response. And this is another one of those APIs that requires a key. This is a fully free service, but you do need to register and get a key. So once you have your query parameters, you mush them all together in the query string, separated by ampersands, and that gives you an endpoint URL. This is looking a little ugly, and in fact, you've probably seen some of these kind of awful URLs that go on for 3 or 4 lines, question mark, and a lot of query parameters. But it's the same basic thing. Once you have this, I can do a get on it. So I'll click on it. It's going to get that location. And that tells me that Austin is in the CDT time zone. And some additional information about it as well. So the challenge we're running into now is that our queries are getting more complex. And doing them with a web browser is getting awkward. So what I would like to do, instead of using a web browser, is use a tool. So I've got an application here called Postman. Postman is an application built on top of Chrome. It's not a browser extension like that JSON view formatter was. This is actually an application that I launch, once I have it installed. It's in my system menu, Postman. It's an application that I launch. But it is built on top of Chrome, and you go to the Chrome store to get it. So one of the nice things is I have some stored queries in here. So let me pull up the API timezone DB query. And if I click on params here, it opens up a table. So instead of that big nasty URL where I need to figure out how to encode things, I just put my query parameters in here, and it'll create that URL for me. So I think I've got another example on notes. Yes. So I'm going to change the location from Austin to Phoenix. So I changed the latitude to 33.44 change the longitude to minus 112.05. And I got these by looking on Google Maps before. If you click on things like nearby location, it'll pop up what the map coordinates are. And so I changed it from Austin to Phoenix. I'm going to do a send, and it'll execute the query. Let me collapse the Chrome so you can see. And so here's the result. The result came back for Phoenix in the Mountain Time Zone. Notice that it showed me that the query worked. I got my 200 OK status and my JSON document result there. So a tool like this is something you will definitely want to add to your tool belt if you start working with these services. Time check. About 10. All right. So let me throw out a couple of other possible APIs to look at. This is a really cool site. MusicBrainz is a catalog of every recorded piece of music that exists in the world. And it is a crowdsourced database. And it's an interesting data set because it's actually a very complex problem set. Because you'll have your artists, you'll have the recordings that they release, you'll have release groups because there isn't just a single version of Beatles Let It Be. There are probably 200 versions within that single release group. When you count, album, CD, import, remix. You got labels, so it's a very complex sort of data set. And I think one of the reasons why I want to point it out, I'm actually not going to go into the API because it's pretty complex, but if you want to get your PhD in API design, take a look at this one. One of the things I really like about the MusicBrainz API is that it's really elegantly designed, and it's a really good example of an API that meets the architecture of a RESTful type API. Okay, a lot of the APIs we've been working with up to this point all the APIs we've been working with up to this point have been involved in getting information, retrieving information. But APIs are much more powerful than that. I'd like to show you the Slack application. I'm sure many of you have seen Slack already. It's a very popular group discussion forum. And I created my own Slack. It's called Chips Test Slack. My Slack is very, very lonely. The only members are me and the Slack bot. But I can use it to demo stuff there. So Slack does have an API. If you go into Slack, you'll see there are all sorts of extensions that you can add to your Slack. So like if you use GitHub and someone does a commit or open an issue, it can post to Slack. Or if you use Jenkins continuous integration, when something kicks off, you can see it in Slack. There's just this rich range of functions you can use through their plugins. The API, though, is a little complex. One of the plugins you can get in Slack is called the webhook plugin. There are two. They're incoming and outgoing webhooks. The incoming webhook plugin makes it very easy. Instead of having to go through their complex API, it provides a very simple API to be able to get messages into a Slack. Let me show you how that works. So once you go into Slack and you add the incoming webhooks, there's a configuration page and it will give you an URL. And that will be your endpoint URL. And so this is it. It doesn't have an API token per se. It just has this thoroughly almost random unguessable URL. And that's kind of the way it protects your endpoint from being hacked by someone. all of the API requests we've done up to this point have been an HTTP GET. For this one, we're going to do something different. The HTTP protocol has a couple of different methods. If you have developed web pages, you've probably seen the GET method, which is the way, like when you click on a link. There's also a POST method. If you've ever created forms, you probably use method equals POST, so that it submits that information via an HTTP POST operation. There are actually a whole lot of them. The four that REST clients typically use are GET, POST, PUT, and delete. In this case, we're going to use POST. So we're used to the idea when we get something from the web, a document comes back. But when we post to the web, we have to send something up to it. We have to send a document with our post. And so our post request is going to have a body to it. And that body that I'm going to post is a JSON document. And by reading the API docs, it told me what I need to put in that JSON document. I put in text, icon has API. There's a username property using a mystery bot. And there's an icon emoji property, which I set to unicorn face. And so what I'm now going to do is when I hit send, it's going to take this JSON document, execute an HTTP post, and send it up to Slack. Let me hide the parameters. Oops, excuse me. Let me hide the body. And you can see that that post was successful. I got back at 200 OK. In the past, when we've been doing these HTTP GETs, we'd be getting back a 200 OK and a document. But we're not retrieving information, so I don't have much of a document here. It just says OK. But what I have is if I go back to the Slack, you can see that I've now got a message in that channel that I was able to post by using that API. So, one of the things we've seen up to this point is that we can use these APIs to access resources, but when we extend beyond a simple GET, we can start doing some fairly rich and complex integrations between things, and that's kind of exciting. So to just highlight what I was saying a moment ago about the HTTP methods, if you've done HTML development, you're probably used to seeing the GET and POST method, where you do GET to retrieve a web page, POST when you're doing a web form. When you're working through a REST API, you will GET to retrieve information, POST to create information. You'll do a PUT when you want to modify information, like change a customer's phone number, and delete to delete information. And so it now becomes a fairly rich vocabulary when you're trying to do these complex operations. One final example. So more and more governments are making their data available to citizens. What they will often do is create an open data portal where they will take the government data and make it available for download. In a lot of cases, they will go beyond that and provide tools to do visualization on that data and also layer APIs on top of that data. The City of Austin does exactly that. The City of Austin's data portal is at data.austintexas.gov. And the screen I'm showing here is a visualization of their found pets data set. And what this does is this data set, it's in the bottom part, is a list of all the animals that have been picked up, taken to the animal center in the past week. So for instance, if you've lost your dog or cat, this might be a place to go to see if it's been recovered. And then on top of that data set, they do the map visualization, which is shown on top. So they also have an API on top of this. So you're able to do queries. I think I've got a Postman query for this. And, 'cause I think I have a Postman query for this. I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have a Postman query for this. 'Cause I think I have So here's the endpoint URL. The path that they give us is resource slash, and then it's an identifier for the data set you're querying. You need to look on their data portal to see what the identifier is. And then you can, in the query string, narrow down what you want to see. In my case, I wanted to see dogs in location 78741. And I'm going to execute a get, because I'm retrieving information. I'm going to hide the params so I have more space. My query succeeded. I've got the 200 OK. And I've got a list of all the dogs that were picked up in that address over the past week. So this is just one of the data sets that's available. There are a lot of different data sets. I did an app built on the restaurant inspection score data set that's posted. There's crime information posted there. There are 311 calls posted on the portal. So it really is a rich assortment of data. One thing to keep in mind, I know the ATX Hack for Change is coming up. So the city's data portal might be a nice resource for some of your projects if you should decide to hack. And so that's it. I think web services are kind of magic. They allow you to access these resources, beyond the confines of your computer, located anywhere on the web, like we saw, the current weather conditions or the world's biggest catalog of recorded music. The other interesting thing about it is that you can start doing really interesting integrations across systems. Like I was able to access Slack and post a message. One of the ways I use that at work, we don't use Slack, we use HipChat, which is somewhat similar. But we've got processes that run every night to rebuild our lab machines. And if something goes wrong with that, we come in the morning and there are HipChat messages that have been triggered to say, hey, you had a problem with your setup. So you can do cool integrations. And a third point, and it's one that I didn't bring in here, or mention here, is that once you start doing APIs, it enables what's called a microservice type architecture. And one of the biggest problems in software engineering is how do you scale and build these really large systems? Because, as things grow linearly, the complexity grows exponentially. And this is a decades-old computer science problem. And microservices is an approach that's coming into vogue where you take these big complex systems, you decompose them into smaller services, and then couple them loosely using APIs. So it's a very important technique. It's something that I'm doing with my team at my day job. So if this is something you're into, please join us. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions?
Does that integrate with applications as well? So you can call and do something in person, or
I believe that it may have a command line interface. It's not what I would use for that. There are other tools such as curl or HTTPie, which are command line tools that I would use more for doing that. But I think there may be some resources there. Primarily, I see Postman used as either an exploratory tool or in some cases possibly a QA tool where you build up your recipes. Yeah.
So you mentioned girls, can you talk a little bit about how to use girls to call
Sure.
You talked a little bit about maybe that I think a lot of people aren't aware that like you can curl it without even having an app. You can like hard code this job.
So curl is kind of Swiss Army knife of the web. It's not something that people particularly delight in using, but it can do almost anything from a command line. And it's more than web. It's like a lot of internet type transfer protocols are supported by curl. So let me go back to my presentation. So this was our Weather Underground query. By using curl, I can also do it on command line. So even without the overhead of installing any apps, you can use curl to do quick queries on things just to see if things are working. Yeah.
This may be just some of those one-off issues, but I'm trying to get information from the Railroad Commission where it's all wells within Caldwell County, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Which I versus like always with that location. So for me, that would be really beneficial for looking at that, but when I'm pulling that information down, it cuts me off to saying I can only grab 1,000 features. Do you know anything about that, or is there a way to work around that, or is it just software that's programming those?
So are you using an API to request these?
Yeah, it's a REST HTTP website.
Okay. If it's an API, one thing that you frequently run into when you're doing these queries over large collections is that they will paginate. And so, you know, you may, for instance, if you go to that Music Brains site and say, you know, give me every album done by the Beatles, for instance, you may not get all 1,000 and 1,000 and 1,000 recordings that were there. You may get the first 100, and then you need to paginate, submit the next request and say, you know, page equal 2, page equal 3, or, you know, rec no equal 500. Again, you know, the API doc will tell you about that, but it is not uncommon when you're doing queries on large collections that they will do pagination. Yeah.
For future, they would be like certain sections, would you just do that call, like in the budget, if they're not, how do you, is there a way to run until it's complete? Like, is there a way to do that in your code?
So what you typically would have to do is do a query to figure out how large the collection is, and then iterate on it like 100 rows at a time. So if you do any database work, this is something that's often done there as well, that you might do a database query, and then you'll only get back the first 10 rows that you'll need to loop through until you've got the whole data collection.
Yeah, I didn't know that happened.
Well, and in her case, I'm hoping that they are just paginating and they're not just arbitrarily saying, no, we're only going to give you this limited view into the data. Hopefully. Are there any API users in the house? Does anybody have any tools they might want to recommend or interesting services?
Postman,
You're using Postman?
just the, like, initially exploring and de-exploring.
It's a nice tool for that. Another tool that I like for API exploration is called SOAP UI. That's kind of the gold standard when you're doing SOAP APIs, but it also supports REST as well. It's a more powerful tool than Postman, but it's also more complex. And it's also a Java application, which makes some people cringe, but I'm a Java developer, so I'm immune to that.
Are there any examples of enterprise level applications or web services that come to mind with when we talk about like using APIs as a web service?
Well, certainly the product I work on does that. What I do in my day job is we build these large systems that manage the millions of broadband residential devices, gateways, cable modems, that kind of stuff. And so our customers need to integrate with our system to be able to say, hey, this customer should be provisioned for 100 megabit service, and this customer for 10 megabit service, and these kinds of things go on. And we expose that capability to our customers through an API. So they need to do either SOAP or REST development to be able to integrate their business systems with our management controller. Is that the kind of thing you were asking about?
Yeah, that's good. It's like real world.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the integration piece. On my unicorn screen, that was point number 2. And then point number 3 was the one that I mentioned about the microservice architecture. And that is absolutely driving our internal discussions on how we want to build and manage and design these complex products.
Any security questions that come up about people when this happens with data sources and bringing that internally, and do we think we'll fit into packaging it?
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that?
Well,
Or not?
so there are a couple of things that you're going to want to consider, with regard to security. The two questions are, is the consumer of that API authorized to use that API? You may also have the additional concern on the consumer's part is, am I talking to the real API and not an imposter? A lot of that can be managed through the access tokens and certificates, SSL certificates. The second concern I would have is just the security and the privacy of the data. And so if you run the API across SSL, HTTPS rather than HTTP, you'll get that layer of protection as well. But security is absolutely a concern. And one of the things I've been working on in our product this past week, making sure that, complex system, lots of user privileges, making sure, certain users, that only users authorized access to the API are able to do API operations.
So you're building the APIs and, you're able to bring up a whole bunch of different data and say, for example, in the letter, you only needed 2 pieces of data. But, you're not rolling out, and you have created APIs so that they can scale.
So one of the challenges is always the trade-off of, the richness of the responses versus the efficiency. So as we saw, that current conditions response was actually a rather lengthy document with a lot of data there. If you're just doing kind of that one-shot query, process in the background on your phone, checking weather conditions every 60 minutes, maybe that's not too bad. If you're doing that frequently, particularly over metered cell phone data, that may start being a concern. So it's always a trade-off. One of the mechanisms I like to do is to use query parameters where you can say question mark, view equals full, view equals partial, or view see this element, comma this element, comma this element. So if the bulkiness, the size of those responses gets to be a problem, there are ways to manage it.
make people all the time, but when it does, it'll give you a subset of what is normally a little like for the set. So you can take something that's several megs in size, which is for every 2 days, and really limit how much time you spend on life.
And what was that called? Jenkins? Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about when you have a product, right? Do you have one API or do you have 10, right? How do you make that determination on how much goes in the data set, how much information you pass? Or do you have different business use cases that say, okay, this is this API that works for.
Typically, all of that is there's what the building, there's what the model looks like, what the conceptual model looks like, what type of we're doing, talking about REST most of the night. Everything about REST is now talking about this object. If you're producing anything that's time, you see it in the verbs. You're saying act on this thing, act on this thing, act on this thing. And so that really changed the nature of partially how granular it is, the nature of how you interact with the data. And as far as like just giving it a rest, I'm just how did that whole model become? What makes the most sense for a model? And I'd say that's really a conversation between you and your customers. Find who's going to use this, who wants to get at it here today, and start asking them questions. What do they want to do? We've got all this great stuff to get done, but how are they going to consume it? And you can talk to different people that are really important.
Let me add one clarifying point too, and that is in all the examples that I've shown, we've looked at only a single endpoint at each web service. Typically, a certain API will implement many endpoints. In an RPC type web service, it'll be an endpoint for each operation you might perform. In a fully RESTful service, it'll be an endpoint for each entity. You might have, customers, orders, ... Yeah.
So the question kind of based off of that, like you mentioned kind of like talking to your customers or at least people are going to be using your API to determine what you're going to break up and whether or not to go RPC or REST. Currently in that space, is that predominantly developers like yourself who are doing that, or is UX also involved in this? Because I know that, traditionally UI and UX are seen as like this front end group, but I would imagine that someone who specializes in like user experience would be a helpful resource in determining like specifically that is a space that UX you find bring in UX people, or are they not in that space yet?
No, generally we bar the door. So my experience has been is that typically the API design exercise has been a developer to developer discussion. It's been me as the provider of the API talking to the developer who will be consuming it and saying, hey, this is the kind of format that I'm looking at providing. Will this work for your application? And so it's often a developer to developer discussion. Because there's not human interaction in the API, it's not as ripe for UI, UX kind of discussion. There are certainly design principles involved in developing a good API, but those tend to be handled more by architects and developers than the UX people. The question where the UX people are going to come in is, so I've got this service that implements the API, I've got an application that consumes it and ultimately presents it. And a lot of times there is a correspondence between what appears on the screen versus those entities that move across the wire. So really where the UI, UX people tend to be is on that far end, driving the discussion with their developers in terms of the data they need.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting because it's like after that, and I see this a lot in internal development, right? Like we don't face customers, we internal teams, and oftentimes developers.
lot of people who are using that data are actually people in marketing or people in branding. And while you do have developers present, you can tell by design that it was two developers talking to one another. And clearly the data set wasn't thought like, oh, this is how a business would interact with our application. Right? Like you can tell there's some user experience missing because by the time UI gets involved, or UX gets involved, the API isn't exactly what we need. And so I just think that's interesting. It's kind of, for some companies, especially the ones where their products are less technical in nature, and certainly their APIs are less technical, it's interesting to see that UI is still kind of that far off of the competition.
I mean, I work directly with my UX people and building APIs for them.
Okay.
Because they're the ones actually accessing it.
Okay.
So if you're building an APIS application, you know how to run through the pricing process for it, as well as all of the board policy APIs inside that application.
Yeah.
Directly from the browser.
Well, especially as you see people in UX become application developers themselves, and I've kind of seen that with like full stack development, and then also just in general, like I don't know how common it is, but I've seen enough to know that the UX and UI are moving in this direction. They're expected to kind of almost be doing some API development in this instance. So I'm interested to see if that has an impact on the way that we design the API architecture in that process.
It's supposed to make that easier for the kind of developers that maybe aren't developers, maybe not players, but things like Incubator and whatnot to build out your JavaScript. But programming complex things is actually it's also wanting to make it a nice looking well set, but you don't want to spend time better. You want to spend your time in visual elements. And a lot of the tools now are making it visual substance. So there's my thing, this is how you get to it. This is the best. So it's pencils where you're at.
I think for a lot of organizations, the standard to reach those to, like, essentially there's user experience at the front end of things, and then there's developer experience interacting with an API, and they're at the top of each of those like efforts is user testing, and like whether or not you're designing something as a developer to be consumed by developers, or in like a typical consumption where a non-technical user, it's still being created through a series of decisions that should be based on research and data with a set of assumptions. So I think like having user experience expertise like driving those decisions on how something is designed based on how it needs to be consumed is kind of like the goal.
Thank you.
I'm not going to be recorded, but I think Chip already talked about it. We've got a couple events in June. Our first one is we are at ATX Hack for Change, June 2nd through 4th. So come hack with us. It's going to be awesome. We had a group there last year, and oh, it's at St. Ed's. And then our second event is there's another startup weekend, first ever LGBTQA event called Hackout, and that's June 22nd through 24th. So if you have ideas or companies or APIs that you want to create, definitely look for more information. We'll be sending things out about Hackout as well. So thanks for coming, and we've got pizza, some wine, beer, water, so enjoy. coffee on Friday and then check out the project and see what interests you. We sit and see what it's like. Yeah, no, that's awesome.